Hi, we're here today to run you through a very brief micro tool called the Model T. So what we're going to do is talk through it, then do a mini demonstration, and then perhaps talk about where you might use this. But it's a fairly small tool, but fundamental to great coaching practice. So I'm just going to talk it through, and perhaps then, Charles, you and I can have a brief conversation to demonstrate how it might be used in a conversation. There are two parts to the Model T, which represent two parts to any conversation, in fact. The one part at the top is expand. That's when you're seeking to understand all the different moving parts in a conversation and to talk about the big picture. So you may have different parts to that big picture and expand your understanding of all of those different parts. So that's an expanding bit of the conversation. And then the bit down here is focusing. And that's a moment of choice for both the coach as well as the coachee in understanding where they're going to pay attention in this bit of the conversation. Now, once that's done, they may then come back up and say, okay, so we mentioned a whole load of other things. Where do we now want to pay attention? So that's broadly the way that the tool it can be described. So let's see it in action now and talk about how you might use it in action. So, Charles, you have an idea about stuff that you want to share that helps us demonstrate this Model T.
Hope so.
Okay, so why don't you start to talk about it, and in the questions that I pose, perhaps I can do some expanding and then we can focus our attention. Okay?
So part of my role in the business is chair of the international business, which means that my role within that is to chair the board meetings when the country managers come together, but it's also a job that requires me to help grow the international businesses. Okay,
so it's about the international business and it's about the kind of role that you have in the international part of your operation.
That's right.
Okay. What other things might you want to talk about in this conversation?
Yeah, so it's tough sometimes to think where to focus. So it's like, because the international business is growing a lot, should I be working more on helping it centralize more? Yeah. Or should it be more decentralized? There's a role that I have around supporting new country managers in place. Okay. Is that going to stay all of my responsibility? Okay. There is also the support team. I think that's going to have to grow and expand as well. And what support do they need from me? So there's just a lot going on, and I'm not quite sure, what to focus on.
Okay. So you did mention a number of different parts to that role, as well as different questions you have about what to do next, or decisions that you might want to make around the international part of the business. Of all of the things that you mentioned, I'm wondering which you're most interested in pursuing in this conversation. What is drawing your attention?
I think it's how can I support the new country managers when they come in place. We're opening 3 offices within the next couple of months. Okay. They're all going to need my support. Okay,
so how can you support your new country managers?
Correct.
In the next few months, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's where you want to focus attention.
Yes.
Great. So why don't you tell me a little bit more about that? Just give me a kind of 10-15 second expansion on that.
Yeah. So within that, there are some processes that are in place to support them. So whether that is a strategic planning sheet so they can plan for their businesses, but whatever processes that are in place, they nearly always need somebody to support them, answer questions. How's this been done before? Mm-hmm. How else could it be done? And also, I have a role as their kind of the coach, mentor as well. Mm-hmm. So it's quite multifaceted in how I have to support them. Often have to travel out and meet some people, mm-hmm. New associates, new team members.
Okay, great. You happy just to pause there for a moment?
Yes.
Okay. So hopefully what you saw there was an opportunity for me in this early part of the conversation I'm having with Charles about this topic to understand the different things that are going on in his head, in a sense, what they were, and then offer Charles a choice as to where he wanted to focus. Now, the question that I used was, which is most interesting to you? And I gave a rider to that question, which is attracting your attention. Very similar kinds of questions. And you may use other questions in the conversations that you have with your clients as well. But are those questions for...
Yeah, I think I like the interest question rather than what's most important or what should you focus on.
Yeah, it's an interesting distinction between the two. Do you find a use for that that kind of question on occasion, which is most important? Do you find
at times, but I don't think when I'm using the Model T. But at times, yes, when you really need people to be able to prioritize to what action they're going to take, it can be a very good question.
Okay. So hopefully you've got an understanding that in any conversation you can expand the different parts that are kind of on the table. And then you can invite your client to focus their attention in a particular direction, a moment of choice. And the way that often I think about this is guiding yourself on a map where there are a number of different forks on the road. And that's the decision point. Where are they going to focus? Of all the things that they've been talking about, which is most interesting to them? Which do they wish to pursue in this next bit of the conversation? And you may have noticed also that once Charles made his selection, I invited him to come back up and expand on that. And there may then have been different parts that he then might want to focus his attention on. So constantly in a conversation, you're expanding it, and then you're focusing it. You bring it up, you're expanding it, and then you're focusing it. So it is rather like a map. It's a way of navigating your way through a conversation in order that you're constantly making sure you're understanding where you're going and what's going to be most productive for the person that you're working with.
So David, one of the ways that I also like to use this is helping the coachee get really specific. So lots of questions around specificity, what exactly, what specifically, and you're getting them down into the detail, and then suddenly you hit them with a big picture question, like if you were to step back and look at this 5 years from now, what would be different? And just the stretching from the big picture into the detail can be very fruitful in terms of raising awareness in another.
Yeah. So another way of directing the conversation, directing the process of the conversation. Okay, wonderful. And I think also an additional tip that I would add in to what you've just described is that we know that the more focused that we can help our clients be, the more productive they will be, and the more the conversation will work hard for them and for their performance at work. So hopefully that's a useful introduction to this tool. It is a micro tool. It's always in play in every conversation you have. But once it's embedded in your head, you don't have to think about it. You do it automatically. So we recommend you use it. And it's a great little tool, a great little way of navigating your way effectively in a coaching conversation.